Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Lesson 8, Audience Review and Assessment. We're reviewing knowledge of audience that we've been learning from Lesson 1 to 7 and applying it to an independent case study. So this is part of Component 1, Exploring Media Products and Creative Media Production, BTEC. So as part of a little assessment for your Do Now task, I want you to log on to Kahoot. You can click the link in the description and use the game pin to assess your knowledge of what you have been learning over the past few lessons. It deals with key terms and identifying target audiences from products. So pause this video and test yourself. Well, I hope you did well in the old assessment. Don't worry, we've always got improvement. If you've got 13 out of 13, well done you. So today, the learning outcome is to demonstrate knowledge of audience and audience appeal. Must be able to identify audiences of media products for specific case studies, should be able to consider the purpose of a media product and its role within a campaign, and you could be able to document links between the media product, target audience and its purpose. Remember, all of these lessons link to Learning Aim A, which is about analysing media products from past and present, and trying to see how they target and engage their audiences, so how they've been constructed with that specific purpose in mind. And we're examining different examples to prove this. So what we've looked at so far, all right, is the media is broken up into different sectors, 3 sectors. We've learned that media products have primary and secondary audiences, that media products are created with a particular purpose in mind, why audience consume media products that they do, that media producers use audience demographics and different profiles to target audiences, and how campaigns are made up to target different audiences, and how media products have changed and developed over time. Now, if you are unsure of any of this, you can review some of this learning. I've put some links up here to different videos. I'm obviously not the only person. I'm only doing this because of lockdown. But Gabbit Media is a great video YouTube channel which has lots of different key terms that can go through for lots of different courses. So it deals with terminology, so you can always have a look at those. If you want to extend it, then you can go into more theory, such as audience cultivation theory and the 2-step flow, but don't worry about doing that now. But it is just food for thought for later. So what we're doing is we're applying our knowledge from the last few lessons. So this will be broken up, this assessment task, into 4 parts. All right. Part 1 is about researching into 1 original TV shows, which I will give you later on. And you're basically looking into as much information about that show as you can: who produced it, what channel it was first broadcast on, when did it first broadcast, what was the background behind the show. Part 2 is that you're picking 1 media product that is part of the past, so where this program or case study that you've chosen started off, and you might look at 1 particular point. So when I showed you in previous lessons, it was Doctor Who. I do model this later on, so don't worry if you're going, wow, this is really overwhelming. I don't want you to be overwhelmed. This is part of a sort of 2 to 3 week assessment, so don't worry at this point. So you can pick, in part 2, you can pick a product, a media product, and then you want to identify who is the target audience of the product, what the purpose of it was, and what the relationship between the product and its target audience and purpose is. And then you want to do the same in part 3 and 4, but for a new part. So, you know, I'm using Doctor Who as an example, but you're comparing past to present. Remember that learning aim. So by having this comparison between past and present, you're looking at 1 from the past and 2 products, but these products must go across the 3 sectors. So how are you going to be assessed, right? So in the BTEC, your levels are pass, merit and distinction. Level 1 pass and level 2 pass, level 1 merit and level 1 a level 2 merit. So these are broken down when it comes to pass merit, but then obviously the highest level, distinction level 2, is the highest you can get. So you'll be assessed on this, and I'll ask you to do this as a peer and self-assessment at the end and submit it with your case study. All right, as I said before, don't get overwhelmed by this. All right, make sure that you're paying attention to the due dates on Show My Homework, because that really does dictate to you what my expectations are, and how you can manage this around your time. So it's not that it has to be completed in a specific hour 1 slot that you would normally have. It is going to be protracted over 3 weeks. But please bear in mind, so level 1 and level 2 pass, you're able to identify and describe a media product and its purpose and the audience. Level 1 merit and level 2 merit is that you've outlined what the media product is and its purpose. So you've given more detail, and then you've discussed the relationship between the purpose and the audiences. The distinction level is about analysis. It means that you've gone into quite a lot of detail, you've looked at it quite methodically, you've broken it down and supported all of your answers with evidence. All right, so these are going to be your case studies. You can look into Rupert the bear, you can look into Mr. Men, you can look into Noddy, or you can look into the magic roundabout. Now, you don't have to do any of these particularly. You can use some of the work that you've been doing over the last few lessons. So if you've gone off and looked into campaigns of your own, and maybe different adverts or different programs, then please just use those as a basis. Don't just sort of throw this work away. Use it as a building block. So what you'll have is that I've created a sort of case study template where you can kind of fill in part 1, 2, 3, 4, and then do a summary to create this presentation. And these are on slides 18 to 19, 20, 21, 22. All right, so slides 18 to 22. And I'll be going through this. So my case study, for example, is Doctor Who. All right, so for part 1, I had to research into Doctor Who and what its background was. I knew that it was produced by a public service broadcaster, the BBC. I knew what their remit was. I knew what date it was released. I've looked up when it was cancelled, why it was cancelled, how it was rebooted, who it was rebooted by, etc. But I've also documented the sources that I have got to. So I've looked on the BBC website. I've looked on merchandising pages, I've looked on fan sites, and then I've also looked into newspaper aspects. So online Wired, which is obviously not a newspaper, but it's a source of information where you get a lot of articles, and then the Metro, which is talking about how the target audience of Doctor Who has changed. Right, so that's what you should be doing for part 1. So if you are going, hang on a minute, this is a bit overwhelming, just pause this video here, review what I'm asking you to do for part 1, and then carry it out. So stagger it as your assessment goes. So pause this video, otherwise we'll continue on. So as part 2, alright, so part 2, this is when you look at a media product from the original series, okay? So if it's Rupert the Bear, Noddy, the Magic Roundabout, and the Mr. Men, you want to maybe go back to the Mr. Men original cartoons. But the idea is that you want to pick one of the 3 sectors. So in my aspect, I've picked Doctor Who Weekly. All right, so I've documented at the top that it's my chosen case study is Doctor Who. Chosen media product is Doctor Who Weekly. The sector is obviously publishing. All right, so remember those 3 sectors: publishing, audiovisual, and interactive. And then the link is on the PowerPoint, so I don't need to go into that. But I then looked into answering the 3 bullet pointed questions. So who is the target audience for this product? So primarily it's males, and predominantly white, given that the central image of Doctor Who, the main protagonist, is white himself. It's got quite a bright blue colour scheme, reds and yellows being there, so it appeals to a younger target audience, stereotypically younger because they're attracted to brighter colours. Approximate age, probably 10 to 18 years of age. It appealed to audiences' need for information because they want to find out more about the show. And it contains additional information behind the show, such as the features section would appeal to them and give them more. But there's also appeals to a sense of thrift, a sort of added value for money, because there's a competition inside, there's free gifts to give away. So in terms of an audience, they're sort of attracted to the fact that there's free things as well. But you can also find out that the target audience is generally younger because it includes comic strips and pin-ups. And you only get to a certain point of your teenage years when you are prepared to put things up on your wall to identify with who you are. So it has a limited. It's not something necessarily you'd find in 19, 20-year-olds. What is the purpose? Well, the purpose is profit and promotion. It appeals to a niche audience that are watching a show, and at the time there was no internet, so fans who wanted to find out more were kind of forced to purchase the promotional merchandise, which made money for the publishers and for the BBC. But it also reflects the BBC's remit because it contains educational articles in looking into the show, so it's part of there to educate and inform. Remember that the concept behind Doctor Who was that it was meant to promote science and history. So the articles in the magazine are reflective of the show. And then we've got to look at the relationship between all of this, the product, target audience and purpose. All right. So it's traditionally assumed that traditional audience were more passive. They had a lot more time to consume publications, right? So it was a niche audience. They've teamed up with Marvel Comics, right? So Marvel Comics is a large publisher, and therefore that would make the product cheaper because they're using a sort of large company with lots of facilities to be able to produce it cheaply, which allow them to appeal to a wider demographic, so an A, B, C, 1, C2 and D social economic group, because even though it's 12p and you go, oh no, it's 12p, this is 12p in the 1970s, so 12 pence was a reasonable amount of money, but again it's not something that children would not have been able to afford out of doing chores and their pocket money. And they've used in the central image they've used a Dalek, all right, so that a lot of people would be able to identify automatically that the Dalek is a regular character, and it's one of the most iconic Doctor Who characters, and so they'll see it on the shelf and be drawn to it. So there's always a link between free giveaways that add a sense of value as well to a target audience. So you start bringing all of that information together. It's designed to make you hit that distinction level, really. So I've gone through this. Pause if you feel you need to, and then just review part 2 and then complete that part 2 point. So then we move on to part 3 and 4. Okay, so looking into those case studies again. What you've got to do now is you're looking at the rebooted version. Okay, so you're looking at the newer series as opposed to the older one, and we've got to look at how the target audience has changed. You know, how's the purpose changed, and what has changed between the product and the target audience and purpose. Now I'm only going to go through one. You're going to have to do 2. All right, and you can fill those into those slides of part 3 and part 4. Now remember. Products are part of campaigns, so in traditional campaigns you were only really appealing to a UK based audience at the time, so the media products used were very limited, whereby if you compare it to modern campaigns, they are essentially designed to appeal to primary and secondary audiences, because different people watch different things. So it showcases how audiences have changed in terms of their consumption, as I've shown previously, but also that they're more that they have changed from a more local UK based to a now more global audience appeal, being able to reach around the world as opposed to just centralised in the UK. So try and bear that in mind when you're analysing in part 3. So I've chosen the audio-visual, and so I've documented this. I've put Doctor Who because that's what my case study is. Series 5 trailer, audio-visual, and I've put the YouTube link in there so that essentially we know what to do. Now I've documented in this how the target audience has changed. I've created some screen grabs from throughout the show so that I know what I'm talking about when I start to do this, and I can refer to those scenes. So the product has changed. Okay, the in terms of the show's appeal to a target audience, because you've got to remember that those kids that were watching the show back in its original invention and conception have now got children of their own. All right, so that would have increased their target audience. So it had moved from 10 to 18 group to now 10 to 40. All right, so it's now including both genders as opposed to being more targeted at men. All right, because a more romantic theme is taking hold between the Doctor and his companion. All right, you've got men in uniform that are there, so that it appeals to men as well. But you've still got that kind of younger audience, right? So it's comparing it to the Past magazine. It's clear that there is a more global audience, right, compared to the past. Sorry, and because of the settings of the storylines in there, they're exploring Italy and America. There's themes about World War II and vampires. So it really does showcase that it's still meeting the BBC remit to educate, entertain and inform. And it'll provide escapism for the audience because it transports them to different worlds. What has changed about the product? Well, the purpose is still to promote Doctor Who and therefore profit for the BBC outside the UK. But it's improved in terms of its special effects, its production values. It's now shot in widescreen as opposed to 4:3. And the producers are also going for critical acclaim. You know, they want the show to be successful. They want to win awards from that. So when we look at how the purpose has changed, well, it hasn't. It's still constructed in a sort of trailer format. However, there are now including interactive elements, so appealing to a more active audience, encouraging them to go online, log on, and find out more about the season. Maybe share it on share it on social media. We've got new villains that are being introduced to the new audience, but there's also the old favourite enemies of Doctor Who that are still being showcased. So that appeals to both target audiences. And then you look at the technology, the special effects. It's really raised the production value, so it really makes it more professional looking, although not diminishing the original Doctor Who series because it was pretty pioneering for its time. But it shows that it has changed, and the idea behind the show, it's not predominantly white anymore. It's got a lot of different ethnicities in it. It's got a more reflective nature of how the UK social society has changed and the makeup of that society. And then again, it's a teaser trailer, so it's not something that is telling the audience it's going to be aired at 8 o'clock on Sunday. It is a sort of pre-release, as looking back at that campaign before, and it's designed to create a buzz and increase views and shares on social media, right? So again, still trying to appeal to that same demographic in terms of socioeconomic groupings: A, B, C1, C2, D and E, right? So you can change and develop that target audience through time. So its purpose has changed because it's now more of a teaser, but it still maintains some of those elements. It's for a more active audience. And it's got a variety of characters, both young and old. Now what you want to do is you want to make sure that you do that for part 3 and part 4, but part 4 you want to do a sector that you haven't covered yet. So I've covered audiovisual and publishing, and you'll probably want to do, for the modern part, the website that is connected to the show, and pick a product from the website to investigate. Okay, so pause this video now and start with part 3 and part 4. Right, so when you want to come to the end of your presentation template, you just want to summarise how your past product, the oldest one that you've looked at, appealed to the target audience at the time, and how does the present audience, how does the present product, the newest, appeal to its target audience. You just want to summarise that in bullet point form. So to review this, all right, I want you to do a bit of self-assessment. If you've uploaded it, then you might be able to peer assess each other's, having a read through it. But you must be able to identify audiences of a product for your case study that we've gone through. You should be able to consider the purpose and its role within a campaign, and to document links between the media product, target audience and purpose. But you want to review that on the peer and self-assessment. Okay, so you might want to give a little bit more wording, some details about how you have met this to justify your answers, but take a read through that and those different levels, assess where you feel that you've hit those different criteria, and then submit your whole presentation to Show My Homework or upload it to the folder in Teams. Right, so I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. I know it's been a bit more wordy and less graphic-y, and I apologise for that, but it is over to you now to try and apply what we've been going through from the last 7 lessons. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next lesson when we're going to start to look at genre.